Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey, everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese. Ghostly Tales from Liao Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you two short stories. The first story is titled, Eavesdropping While Holding a Mirror. In Yidu County, there was a family named Zhang. In this family, there were two brothers, both talented scholars who excelled in writing. As they grew older, both of them got married. The elder brother, known for his intelligence, had already gained a reputation in the county. Their parents were very fond of him, and they treated his wife exceptionally well. The younger brother, on the other hand, was not as well known in the county, even though he was also quite intelligent. Consequently, his parents didn't favor him as much, and they didn't think highly of his wife, often looking down upon her. Due to the different treatment they received, there arose some conflicts between the two sisters-in-law. The second sister-in-law often said to her husband, "Both of you are men, why can't you stand up for your wife?" Eventually, in a fit of anger, the second sister-in-law refused to sleep with her husband. This situation spurred the younger brother to work hard and strive for success. He dedicated himself to studying diligently, and before long, he gained recognition in the county. Slowly, his parents began to favor him as well, but their attitudes still didn't match their affection for the elder brother. That year, the imperial examinations were approaching. The second sister-in-law was eager for her husband to become successful. On New Year's Eve, she secretly left home, carrying a mirror with her to eavesdrop on the conversations of people in the streets, hoping to gain some insight. As she walked past a house, she overheard two people inside, seemingly just waking up. They playfully urged each other, saying, "You should go and cool off too." Upon hearing this, the second sister-in-law returned home, still unsure whether these words were an omen of good fortune or bad. In the end, she decided to put it out of her mind and not dwell on it any longer. After the imperial examinations, both brothers returned home, even though the examination site was quite far away. The weather was scorching hot, and the two sisters-in-law were busy in the kitchen, preparing food to send to the workers laboring in the fields. They toiled in the sweltering heat, making them extremely uncomfortable. At that moment, someone rode up to the gate of the Zhang family on horseback, bearing good news. The eldest brother had passed the examination. Zhang's mother was overjoyed and came to the kitchen to tell the eldest daughter-in-law. "The eldest son has passed the exam. You can come out and cool off now." However, the second daughter-in-law, still upset and angry, continued to cry while cooking. A little while later, someone else arrived to inform the elderly couple in the Zhang family that their second son had also passed the exam. Upon hearing this news, the second daughter-in-law, in a fit of pride and excitement, forcefully threw down the rolling pin and stood up. She declared with a loud voice, "I will also go and cool off." It was only later, as she reflected on her words, that she realized the prophecy of the mirror had come true. When the author compiled this story, he must have been quite delighted because he added such a commentary at the end. He said, "When a person is poor, even parents may not treat their own sons as such, and there is a reason for this. While the family is not a place for quarrels, the second daughter-in-law of the Zhang family made many efforts to inspire her husband, which set her apart from those wives who only knew how to complain. And finally, the scene where she threw down the rolling pin and stood up is indeed a moment of pure satisfaction for all time. In this story, a custom is mentioned that might have already faded from popular practice. On New Year's Eve, people would walk outside carrying a mirror. The first sentence they heard from someone outside was considered an omen, providing a hint about what the person holding the mirror sought. The second story is titled Changqing Monk. In Changqing County, there was an elderly monk. His moral character was noble, and despite being over 80 years old, he was still physically robust. One day, the elderly monk suddenly fell to the ground and lay there. When the other monks in the temple rushed to help him, they found that the old monk had passed away. However, the old monk was unaware of his own death. His spirit left his body and wandered in the human realm. Eventually, his spirit drifted into the territory of Hunan. In Hunan, there was a young man from an old aristocratic family who was leading a group of over 10 people for a hunting expedition in the outskirts, riding horses and carrying falcons. Suddenly, the horses seemed to be startled and began to gallop uncontrollably. The young man accidentally fell from his horse and tragically died. At that very moment, the spirit of the elderly monk happened to be passing by and, in a strange twist of fate, merged with the lifeless body of the young man. As the spirit of the elderly monk entered the body, the young man gradually regained consciousness. Servants and attendants rushed forward, surrounding him and inquiring about his condition. Bewildered, the young man could only say, "How did I end up here?" The servants exchanged puzzled looks and then helped him return home. As soon as they entered the mansion, they were greeted by a multitude of elaborately adorned women who came forward to inquire and greet them. The young man was greatly surprised and exclaimed to those around him, "I am a monk, how did I end up here?" His family thought he was speaking nonsense and earnestly tried to reassure and enlighten him. The young man, however, stopped explaining and simply closed his eyes in silence. When the family served him food, they noticed he only ate simple rice and completely avoided indulging in alcohol or meat. In the evenings, he requested to sleep alone, not allowing his wives and concubines to attend to him. A few days later, he suddenly expressed a desire to go outside. His family was delighted by this decision. Once he stepped out, however, many stewards and servants immediately approached him, seeking his guidance on financial matters, account management, and various other affairs. He used the excuse of prolonged illness and fatigue to evade responsibility for all these matters. Then, he asked the servants, "Do you know about Changqing County in Shandong?" They all replied, "Yes." He continued, "I feel restless and bored. I want to travel there. Quickly, help me prepare my belongings." The servants advised him, "Your illness has just improved. It is not suitable to embark on a long journey now." But he refused to listen. The following day, he set out with his servants. Upon arriving in Changqing County, he found that the scenery and landscapes were just as he remembered. Without asking for directions, he walked directly to the monastery. In the monastery, his former disciples greeted him with great respect upon seeing their honored guest. He inquired, "Where is the old monk of this temple?" The monks replied, "Our master passed away some days ago." He then asked about the location of the old monk's grave, and the monks led him there. He saw a solitary grave about 3 feet tall, with wild grass not yet fully covering it. The monks were puzzled by his actions, and did not understand what he intended to do. After inspecting the grave, he instructed his servants to prepare the horses for their return to Hunan. Before leaving, he cautioned the monks. "Your master was a strict adherent of Buddhist precepts. He left behind many manuscripts and belongings. You must carefully preserve them and make sure nothing is damaged." The monks nodded in agreement. He then left the monastery. Upon returning to his home in Hunan, he sat motionless like a piece of dead wood, spending his days reciting sutras and paying no attention to household affairs. He stayed in Hunan for several more months before secretly slipping out and returning directly to his former monastery. He approached his disciples and declared, "I am your master." At first, the monks were skeptical and exchanged amused glances, thinking he might be speaking nonsense. To prove his identity, he recounted the circumstances of his soul's return and shared stories about the deeds of the old monk during his lifetime, which astonishingly matched the facts. The monks began to believe his words, and they invited him to stay in his old quarters, resuming their service to him just as they had done before. Later, the young man's family sent carriages and horses multiple times, begging him to return, but he paid no attention. After more than a year, the young man's wife sent several capable servants to deliver many things to him. However, he declined gold, silver, and silk, accepting only a simple cloth robe. The young man's friends would sometimes visit him at the temple, showing great respect. However, they noticed that he had become quiet and reserved, yet sincere and straightforward. Even though the young man was now only 30 years old, he often spoke about his experiences over the past 80+ years. At the conclusion of this story, the author provides an interesting commentary. He says, "Some people say that when a person dies, their soul disperses, but this monk's soul traveled thousands of miles and did not disperse. It must be because of his steadfast nature. I'm not surprised by his resurrection, but I'm amazed that even though he was reborn into a life of wealth and splendor, he could still refuse others and resist worldly temptations. For most people, the opportunity to enjoy the luxuries of life in the blink of an eye would be a blessing, and they would willingly embrace it, let alone a monk accustomed to a life of austerity." This story touches upon the folk legend of borrowing a corpse to resurrect the soul. If you're not familiar with this concept, you can refer to the previously narrated story of Ujur, where there's a detailed explanation. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tales. Eavesdropping while holding a mirror and Changqing Monk. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.